Help support the show by joining the Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. Also, hit that like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content. I'm going to be honest with you all, right? Since the Browns lost that game to the Jets where they gave up like 14 passing yards to receivers and they lost to a one-win football team, I have let go of the idea this year that the Cleveland Browns would be a serious team. Now, obviously, I never thought they were going to be a playoff contender this year. I predicted them to go under 500 at the start of the season for a lot of the reasons that we saw this year, right? Offensive consistency being the main one. Obviously, the Browns have been worse than I expected them to be. Real quick, before I get all into this, I want to thank my sponsor for today, Sleeper. Real quick, just want to let you guys know Sleeper has a new offer here. They're offering a free $20 entry, no deposit required. And also, if you're a first-time user, you also will receive a 100% match on up to $100 when you use the promo code WORSTTAKE. Again, $20 free, no deposit required. Plus, first-time users also receive a 100% deposit match up to $100. Join Sleeper. But I did hold hope for a while that they would become better offensively and be a more competitive football team than what they had been at the beginning of the season, not be a complete mess. And I was okay with that being what they would become. I wanted that to be what they become because, I think there is some good to be gained from winning games and being competitive, right? I think there is some development that can happen when that is the focus and you're playing in games that matter at the end of the season. Even if you're not going to make the playoffs, you're just playing in games that have something on the line, and you're not getting guys used to playing in games that don't matter. And we're going to touch on that whole aspect of this game. But since that Jets game, I had given up hope that they would become that and have that and be serious. That was an all-time marker of a team that's likely to pick in the top 5. And since then, when the Browns lose, it hasn't really hit hard, right? It hasn't really made my day any worse or any better, right? It's just been a thing. But this loss on Sunday, it hit a little different. I felt this one. And I've been wanting to give myself some time after the game to really think about that and to think about why that is and why it is that I felt like that after this game, despite the fact that I know that this team's not serious, that I know that this team's destined for a top 5 pick and likely now a top 3 pick. Why is it that this loss bothered me? And it goes back to my feelings about tanking. I'm not a fan of tanking, right? Even soft tanking, where you get to the end of the season and you just decide, well, we're not going to win games. I can understand why you would do it. I can understand why the short-term result can be appealing and maybe even the most logical solution for a lot of teams. And I know a lot of Browns fans are at the point to where they feel like losing is the most logical thing to do going forward if we're looking at the big picture of the offseason. I just think in that conversation of tanking, we don't value enough what losing does to a football team, and in particularly a young football team. Losing damages players. Winning cements good habits. Here's an example of why this loss, despite the fact that, look, it put the Browns in a good position to go get a quarterback. If that's what you want to do, it's putting the Browns in a good position to just get whatever guy they want in the draft. If you don't want to get a quarterback, right? Like the Browns draft position is going to be infinitely better for losing that game, but I don't feel good about that shit right now. And the reason I don't feel good about it is how this game broke down and what you're incentivizing and what you're not incentivizing by how this game broke down. See, what happened at the end of that game, if we can get past the conversations about should the Browns have gone for two, if we can get past the conversations about who should have been on the field at the end of the game in that final 2-point conversion, right? People are going to have that debate all week, maybe even all month, that's for them, right? I said my piece on it in the video on Sunday. If you watch that video, you know how I feel about it. But as far as that conversation goes, I'm over it, right? It's in the past. But what bothers me about how they lost, outside of all of those conversations that's going to be had, is what we saw at the end was a young team, and particularly the rookies on this team, fight their ass off to try to win that game. They fought their asses off to try to win that game. And look, it happened on both sides of the ball. I understand the defense was fairly disappointing in this one. They gave up way too many rushing yards to Tony Pollard, 161 yards, unacceptable for a defense that prides itself as much as the Cleveland Browns defense does. But if we're talking about how the Browns made that comeback, the defense was instrumental in doing that, right? And honestly, if we're talking about how the Browns lost the game, like the offense also gave 14 points to the Titans with turnovers. So like the offense isn't without blame. The defense isn't without blame. You lose a game because of a team effort. Some people can be more responsible for a loss than others. And I argued in my video on Sunday, Kevin Stefanski is largely responsible for that game not going into overtime. But if you want to know more about that, again, watch that video. I want to talk about what happened here at the end, right? The fight that the young guys showed. Because at one point, this game felt like it was over, right? The Titans scored a touchdown. The Browns fumbled the ball, right? Dylan Sampson fumbles the ball. The Browns are at that point only down 4, but Dylan Sampson fumbles the ball. The Titans take that fumble, go 9 yards of offense, and score a touchdown with it. And that brings the lead from 21-17 to 28-17. The Browns then, on their next offensive possession, not only go a very uninspiring 6 plays for 18 yards, but on the ensuing punt, they get blocked. The Titans block the punt. And now the Titans have the ball in field goal range. And that's where this game could have gotten blown out of proportion, right? 28-17, Titans have the ball in field goal range. You just made 2 giant mistakes, special teams and offense, to cost yourself points. You could go down as much as 3 scores here. Browns are down 11 at this point. It would be very difficult to force a field goal, but the defense steps up. You get a stuff from Mason Graham. You get a stop from Ronnie Hickman. You get a stop, a TFL from Myles Garrett, and you force a field goal with 6 minutes and 17 seconds left in the game, which makes it only a 14-point lead. That was an underrated point in that game. And then immediately after that, the young guys, the guys from this draft class on offense, start cooking. Shedeur Sanders plays some of his best football of the day, right? They got a 10-yard penalty early in that drive. He answers back 15-yard pass to Dylan Sampson, right? And then they get a 15-yard penalty on top of that. Shedeur gets another 17-yard pass to Harold Fannin. Shedeur gets a 14-yard pass to Gage Larvin. And then Shedeur has one of his better plays of the day where he breaks through a bunch of contact and then runs into the end zone. Fantastic effort by the rookies on offense to not give up in that moment. And then they go for 2. The snap is fumbled. I from my view of it, I blame the center on that, right? Looked like Luke Whippler. Seems like the most logical person to blame. He came into the game after Ethan Posick popped his Achilles. He's not that experienced. He's probably not snapped the ball. Well, you would imagine he's actually snapped the ball a ton to Shedeur because he's the backup center, and there's only 2 centers on the team. But still, first time in a real game, snapping the ball to Shedeur. Maybe there's some miscommunication there. Probably on the center. If a center comes out on Twitter and writes some kind of dissertation about how that's not the center's fault, then take that center's word for it. I'm not going to sit here and get in these debates. Okay. I thought it was the center's fault, but if a center tells you I'm wrong, then I'm wrong. But anyways, they botched the 2-point conversion, but the defense then forces another 3. And now Tennessee only takes like 1 minute and 44 seconds left. Browns get the ball down 8. 2 minutes and 40 seconds left to go. Like, they have a real chance to make something happen here. And again, Shedeur gets downfield. And how does he get downfield? Throwing to Harold Fannin, throwing to Dylan Sampson. There's a couple of penalties that help you out along the way. Dylan Sampson gets a 31-yard reception here and there. And then you get a 7-yard touchdown pass to, who was it? Harold Fannin. The young guys, the rookies, stepping up, not giving up in that moment, giving you every ounce of fight that they have. Unfortunately, it's also the young guys who made some of the mistakes at the end of the game. Browns, because they went for the 2-point conversion earlier, which some may argue, myself included, was unnecessary, but Kevin wanted to do it. Because the numbers wanted to do it, and I assume Tommy Rees was okay with it too. So that's the decision that was made collectively for the offense. They went for 2. They fumbled the snap. It forced them into going for this 2-point conversion. And they have a good play call in. It's a reverse off the Wildcat look that they've been running. They haven't run a reverse off this look, so it's going to catch the Titans off guard. But for whatever reason, Quincy Judkins, who's been practicing this play since he's come back, I would imagine, because Joe Bitonio talks about them running that play at Philadelphia Eagles joint practice. So this wasn't some new play that they haven't worked on. This is a play that they've been working on Fridays every week, just in case they get into this situation. They've been working on this play, and for whatever reason, Quincy Judkins forgets to flip the ball to Gage Larvin, and the Browns don't get the 2-point conversion. Now again, the young guys giveth, the young guys taketh. But why I feel like that loss hit harder to me was that was a missed opportunity. I wish that we would have just kicked that field goal to get it to overtime, because I think even getting that small win, getting to overtime, cements a lot of good habits for the guys in that locker room. Losing in regulation, I don't think cements anything. When you play for the Cleveland Browns, there is this small voice in the back of your head probably that tells you that bad things happen to you because you're on the Browns. We all know it. We all feel it as fans, and we all assume the players feel it. Some players have talked about feeling it. And if the Browns want to get anywhere, they have to break players out that mindset of thinking that things are going to go wrong because you play for the Cleveland Browns. One of the coaches in college football I respect a ton is Kirk Cignetti. And one of the things that Kirk Cignetti has done over the last couple of years is take a program like Indiana, who is a perennial loser, the most losing program in all of college football, or at least in the Big Ten. I mean, like, they're synonymous. Their football program is, at least, with losing. But if you ever hear Kirk Cignetti handle how they talk about these streaks that go on in Indiana, he doesn't care about that. I mean, he is aggressive about not caring about it. Like when they were playing Penn State and they constantly kept bringing up to Kirk Cignetti, hey, Indiana has not lost to Penn State. Kirk Cignetti's response was, we've never played Penn State. And I thought that was interesting because it sends the message that, yeah, those Indiana teams did not beat Penn State, but we're not those Indiana teams. We're Kirk Cignetti's Indiana. We are a different Indiana team, and we have no negative history in Happy Valley. So don't tell us about this bullshit. Same thing happened when they played Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game and beat Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game, right? They were telling them, oh, Indiana hasn't done this in so long, and Indiana hasn't beat Ohio State since the 1980s. And, all of this stuff. And Kirk Cignetti's response was similar to the one that he had against Penn State, because he understands when you are coaching a program that unfortunately has a long history of losing, part of how that losing sustains itself is that the people in that program hear this small voice in the back of their head. Maybe it's the fans that constantly interact with them on social media. Maybe it's their own self-confidence of how they feel about being on a team that's not winning a ton. But there's this small voice you hear in the back of your head that tells you that you're not just losing because you weren't good enough. You're losing because you're playing football for the program that you're playing football for. And that is a dangerous feeling to let manifest in a locker room with young players. And Kirk Cignetti realizes that, and that's why he's so aggressive about those things. And my fear is what happened on Sunday is something that makes that voice in the back of their heads a little bit louder. I want this team to reach their full potential. I get upset about this team. I have high hopes for this team because I know that they're talented enough to do a lot of things if some things can go right. Obviously, they need some offensive linemen. Obviously, they need some wide receivers. Obviously, they need to figure out what their long-term answer is going to be at quarterback. But they can get this right to a place where they can be so much better than the Browns have been my entire life. I don't think they're that far away, even though it feels like they're so far away because they're not winning any games right now. They have some young talent on offense. They have a lot of young talent on defense. If they just get a couple of the right pieces, they can make that switch. But this kind of stuff is dangerous. People don't think about it. People don't think about this kind of stuff as much. And I think this is why every Browns team feels the same. This is why everybody goes, oh, same old Browns. Because nobody's trying to attack that little voice in the back of the head that tells you you're not just losing because you stink. You're losing because you're on the Browns. That's the difference. When the Ravens lose a game, their players aren't thinking they're losing because they're on the Ravens. They're just thinking they lost because they weren't good enough. When you lose a game and you're in Pittsburgh, you're not thinking we're losing because we're in Pittsburgh. You're thinking you lost because we didn't play good enough. Hell, even in Cincinnati, they don't have that problem. Well, they have that problem to a smaller extent than Cleveland. Cleveland has that problem. We're the Indiana of this division, unfortunately. As great as our history has been in the 1960s and earlier, this is who this team has become. And you got to address that. And you got to take advantage of any opportunity you can to make people feel like being on the Browns is not going to be an obstacle to things working out. And I guess that's why the loss bothered me more. Maybe I'm just tripping. Maybe my anxiety over this thing is just something that I have because I'm a fan. And if they get the right quarterback, and if Shador's really good, or if they get the right wide receiver, if they draft the right offensive lineman, all this shit is a moot point. I hope that's correct. All I know is that I don't want to see this team put these young guys through that again. I don't want to see this team continue to have these young guys play in games that, quite frankly, don't matter. I don't want this team to get used to playing football that does not matter. I don't want this to become a familiar feeling for this football team. I don't want this to become comfortable for this organization. And I've worried that it's already too comfortable. Maybe I'm tripping, maybe I'm not. But those are my thoughts after being able to sit with this game for just a little bit of extra time. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.